I'm excited that you're here. Are you excited that you're here today? That you get to be here? Man, we've been on a journey the last couple of weeks. It started with Easter, and man, just a lot of people embracing Jesus for the first time, and then understanding what takes place after that through temptation, through sin, through suffering, and how we navigate all of it. And it's not easy. Choosing the life of a Jesus follower is not easy. We know it's better because we have Jesus with us, but it's not easy. And what I want to do today is I want to talk about joy in our lives. But here's what I know, that even with suffering, we still need to remain joyful. And it's hard. It's hard to do that, especially with the things that we're going through and things that are taking place in our world. It's hard to keep out our joy. And last week we talked about suffering a little bit and how we can find blessing in it. But this week I want to talk about how there's going to be this ebb and flow of suffering and blessing, and how you need to keep your joy all the way through it. I think in order for us to live out our joy in Jesus, we have to better understand our suffering, why we suffer, why things happen in our lives. Now, I was thinking about just different times where I've seen just joy kind of expressed in the best of way. And I kept going back to my kids. Because like when I come home from work, or when me and my wife will come home from a long trip, there's this excitement and joy from my kids. Like they haven't seen me for what seems years to them, right? Like they're running around doing circles like little chihuahuas, right? Right? And they come and they just shower you with love and passion, and all you did was show up. You're like, I'm back, like, right? Maybe you don't have kids, maybe you have a dog. Your dog might do this for you, right? If you have a cat, I'm sorry. Your cat doesn't love you. It just wants you to feed it. Anyway, sorry. I have a cat. He's great. But he will not show excitement and joy when I come home. That's just the truth. But there's this excitement. There's this passion. And they shower me with love. And it's just because I'm present. I'm there with them. In my presence, my kids show joy. I was thinking about that, and that happens. And then, I get there, I get settled, and, they're jumping and running and jumping and climbing and doing all these things. I'm a jungle gym. And then, we kind of get back into the ebb and flow of things. And then, it happens because your parents and kids aren't smart all the time. And there's discipline, and there's punishment, and there's daddy getting loud, right? And the joy that my kids had for me quickly turns to another emotion, right? Anger, dislike, right? And for them, it's suffering. Like, I have to clean my room like it's the worst, right? Like, just clean up the mess that you made. Like, what's wrong with that? And it kind of happens. So there's this joy, and then for them, there's this suffering, and then it's okay, we move past it, right? And then, we'll have fun, and we'll play games, and we'll go get ice cream, and, I'll get them gifts. So there's joy, and there's suffering, and there's joy. I began to think about this, and I began to think about this in our lives and how this happens, and I came to this, like, it's almost like this suffer-joy sandwich that we have, right, in our lives. Suffer, joy, and it's like there's suffering, there's joy, there's suffering, or there's joy, there's suffering, there's joy. And like, this is a sandwich that we're constantly partaking in. And the same is true in our walk with Jesus. Because when we become Christians, when you embrace Jesus for the very first time, there should be this joy that exudes from you from being in the presence of God, what seems like for the very first time. Having your eyes open, entering into new life, and you're running around like a crazy. You're like, I'm saved, right? Like, you're like, I know God now. He saved me. He changed me. He died for me. There's this excitement and there's this joy. If you've ever met a new Jesus follower, you know, like something happened. There's a celebration, and there's been transformation, and you know about it. And it happens. And then, you kind of get into this thing. You get hungry for the word. You get hungry for worship. You get hungry to be at church and to serve at church. And you're loving it. But at the same time, life still happens, right? You still got to deal with the things that are going on at work. You have financial struggles. You have health issues. You have, this stress and anxiety and responsibility of another human being if you're a parent, right? And it's like, I have joy in being a parent, but man, there is stress, there is worry, and there is anxiety that comes with it. And there's just hardships and then unmet expectations. And it quickly begins to steal the new joy that you found. And you get pulled back into it. And your passion and your excitement begin to subside. And all your focus goes again to the problems that you have. But you got to keep that joy in your life. And I think when our joy begins to be taken by the things that we're going through, we stop pursuing God. We stop obeying his word. And when that happens, we make some mistakes. We fall back into old ways. And when that happens, we get down on ourselves. We get angry at ourselves. We even get angry at God. But here's what I want you to know. As we go through this, our joy in Jesus needs to overpower the trials that we face. Always. We've got to remember that no matter what's taking place in our lives, we've got to hold on to the joy that we found. We've got to remember the joy that is found only in Jesus. And I think many times, not all the time, many times our best moments follow some of our worst moments. I was thinking about the best way to, best example of that, and I couldn't help but go to childbirth, right? Because there's this joy, right? The joy of getting pregnant, you know what I'm talking about. The joy of getting pregnant, right? And then you become pregnant, and then you get to go to doctor's visits, and you get to hear heartbeats, and you get to see growth, and you get to find out the gender, and there's just all this joy. And then it gets into like week 32 through 36, and you're like, when is this gonna be over? This tiny human being has invaded my body. It's kicking my bladder. I have to pee like 10 times in an hour, right? And it's just like, I love you, but get out of me. I mean, I've not experienced this, but I've been around enough pregnant ladies to know, like that is, they're like, oh, I can't sleep, and I need it, right? And so there's that. And there's a little bit of discomfort in that, and then it's time, right? The contractions start, and those are fun, I've heard, anyway. And so the contractions start, and then you go to the hospital, and then there's the pain of labor. And I haven't endured it, but it looks like they are suffering, right? Like there is pain. So you got the joy, you got the suffering, you got the pain, and then the moment that child enters this world, all of that goes away, and there's this new joy that you get. I was just thinking about that. That's what I'm talking about today. Like there's this suffering and there's this joy, and then the suffering and the joy, because then the child's born, and then guess what you get as new parents? No sleep. I almost said till Brooklyn, but I don't know if you guys would have got that. Anyway, some of you got it. That makes no sense whatsoever why I would say that. Just popped into my head. So anyway, joy, suffering, joy, suffering. I was, as I was preparing for this message, I kept going back to this story about King David and when he entered into being the king. I want to preface the story a little bit because David was anointed to be king, but had to wait many years to become the king. As a matter of fact, he had to run for his life from King Saul. Many times he tried to kill him. And so he's on the run. He knows he's going to be king. He's been anointed to be the king, but he's having to wait. He's having to be patient. He's suffering. He finally gets to become the king. And when he becomes the king, man, the surrounding people start fighting him, and he defeats his enemies with God's help. And as he becomes the king, he says, all right, I'm gonna enter into Jerusalem, but I don't want people to think that it's just me presiding over the throne. I want people to know that it's God who presides over me as I preside over the throne. And so in this story, what he does is as he's entering back in Jerusalem, he wants to bring the presence of God into his kingship, into his nation, so that everything goes back to God. And I want to read about that. And it's found in 2 Samuel verse 6, or chapter 6, verse 1. It'll be up on the screens for you guys. Here's what it says. David again gathered all the chosen men of Israel, 30,000 of them. Then he and all his people went to Bala in Judah to bring back the ark of God. This is the presence. Here's what it says. The ark is called by the name of the Lord all-powerful, whose throne is between the gold creatures with the wings. So the ark is the Ark of the Covenant. You guys heard of that? How many of you guys have heard of the Ark of the Covenant? Okay, some of you have not. So I want to explain this. Like, for the Israelites, this was the tangible presence of God. It was important. It was a staple of these people, of God's chosen people. It was where God presided. It was where their sins were atoned for. And this is something that was very important all through their history and was protected for thousands of years. And the best way to explain how important the ark was to them is to say it just like this. The Ark of the Covenant is our Jesus, right? Jesus replaced the ark. He became the perfect presence of God, but that's what it meant to them. The ark was just as important to them as Jesus. Jesus is our tangible evidence, right? And tangible presence of God, but it was perfect. So I wanted you to understand, like, that's how important the Ark of the Covenant is. That is the presence of God. And so David wanted to bring it in. Verse 3, it says, they put the Ark of God on a new cart and brought it out of Abinadab's house on the hill. And Uzzah and Ohio, sons of Abinadab, led the new cart, which had the Ark of God on it. Ohio, I think it's Ohio, I don't know how to say that guy's name, was walking in front of it. David and all the Israelites, I love this, verse 5, David and all the Israelites were celebrating in the presence of the Lord. They were playing wooden instruments, lyres, harps, tambourines, rattles, and cymbals. And here it is. The presence of God is with us, and they are celebrating. They're letting people know, like, this is awesome, this is amazing. And I love this because God is with them. And they're letting people know that we are excited about God's presence. And this is the case for us when we receive God's presence in our lives through Jesus via the Holy Spirit. It's a whole nother message for another time, but that's how it happens. We celebrate. Again, because where there is transformation, there should be celebration. Always. There should be joy. And we celebrate through praise and through worship. We celebrate and we declare through baptisms who we are. We celebrate by sharing our story. This is who I was. This is what took place. This is what Jesus did in my life, and this is what I'm doing now. This is who I am. Let me tell you about what God is doing in my life. We showcase joy. We showcase excitement found by embracing Jesus. That's what the Israelites are doing. And just so you know, the Ark of the Covenant hadn't been in their presence for some time. As a matter of fact, the Philistines had taken it, and they quickly regretted taking it because some bad stuff went down for them. And then they said, take it back, please, but because it wasn't meant to be with them. But they hadn't had it, and they missed it. And in this moment, they celebrated what God was doing. So everything's good, right? There's a new king. This is a new era. We've defeated our enemies. The presence of God is with us. It's going to be great. There's that joy. But guess what? Suffering came right away. Look, check this out, verse 6. It says, when David's men came to the threshing floor of Nacon, the oxen stumbled. Now, the oxen were pulling the cart that the Ark of the Covenant was on. That's why that's important. And so Uzzah reached out to steady the Ark of God, and the Lord was angry with Uzzah, and he killed him because of what he did. So Uzzah died there beside the Ark of God. Now, we'll talk about that in a minute, right? But suffering happens like this, right? Like you're going along, everything's great, everything's wonderful, and then bam, you feel like you got hit by a truck. And then you're left just dumbfounded like, God, I thought we were good. I thought I was on track. I thought I was living for you. I thought I was doing everything right. We were celebrating in you. And you just get left wondering, like, why am I experiencing this in my life? I don't need it, right? And that's what takes place right here. But the elephant in the room is like, this quickly goes from celebration to a man dying, and you're like, I don't get why God just killed that guy, right? Is anyone like, what? Did God really just like kill him? And it's crazy because you read that and you're like, this doesn't seem deserved. He was just reaching out his hand to steady the Ark of God. You're like, that's a good thing, right? Like he's helping, making sure that the Ark and the presence doesn't fall and get dirty. And this is where understanding God is so important. But let me tell you, or understanding Scripture is so important, but let me tell you that understanding the ways of God is hard. As a matter of fact, we will never get to a place where we fully understand God. His ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. And that's the truth. And I think the more you try to understand God, the less you will. But know this, and this is so important. The more you get to know God, the more you'll understand God. Do you understand that? It's not just about understanding the ways of God, it's getting to know the character of God. And once you know the character of God, all of this begins to make sense. But let me kind of unpack what just happened, why this man died for touching the ark. Now, like I said, the presence of God is important. The Ark of the Covenant is important. And because it was so important, there were some specific instructions that God gave to the Israelites. Very, very specific, very simple when you read them. And it's kind of like, we talked about Adam and Eve last week, and he said to Adam and Eve, one thing, don't eat the fruit from the middle of the tree. That's it. That's the only thing you got to follow. And the same thing happens here with Uzzah. You had a few simple instructions to follow, but they didn't. And here's what I need you, this is just one thing that God laid on my heart to say. As Jesus followers, don't act shocked when you face suffering when you're living in disobedience. Does that make sense? And I'll get into what that looks like for Uzzah, but like Adam and Eve, they disobeyed God. And when you disobey God, guess what? That is sin. And when sin enters, we talked about it last week, there's suffering. Disobedience, sin, suffering. Uzzah did the same thing. He disobeyed. There was sin, and he suffered. But you're like, why? Why did he suffer? And here's why. It's because of the instructions. And this is why getting the cultural context of the Bible is so important. Because as a new Christian, or maybe even an atheist, you could go to this scripture and be like, why would I follow a God that would kill a man for touching an ark? Right? You can read it and you can just get angry at the fact that this just happened and not understand it. And you can walk away from it and say, I can't. Or you can be like, you know what? Old Testament is not for me. I'm going to go to the New Testament. But let me tell you, the God of the Old Testament is the God of the New Testament because God never changes. Amen. So you can't take the New Testament without the Old Testament. It is the story of Jesus. This is the story of our salvation. And it helps us understand the character of God. So let's get some cultural context. There were specific instructions for the ark. Now, there were a little bit more than what I'm going to share, but I want to share the two that kind of go with what we were talking about. And with these instructions, if you were an Israelite, you knew. You just knew. This was something that they practice all the time. I mean, their people memorized the first 5 books of the Bible like before the age of 12, like that just, could you imagine? I can't even memorize a chapter, right? And they're memorizing the first 5 books. And so they knew this stuff. They were supposed to know this stuff. But it seems that Uzzah and others around him forgot 2 of the instructions that God gave. And they were these 2 things. Number 1, don't touch the ark. You don't touch it. And it says that in Numbers. You can't, if you touch the Ark of the Covenant, it says this, you will die. And they knew that. There was only one person that could touch the ark, and it was the priest. And it was when he was atoning for the sins of the people. He was allowed, no one else, and only at a certain time. So rule number 1, don't touch it. And we know that he was trying to help, but he touched it. And in touching it, he should have known, well, I'm going to help the ark, but I'm giving, like he sacrificed. Like maybe he died a martyr. I don't think that was what he was trying to do. Anyway, he touches it. And that was his first mistake. But the other thing, the other instruction was that the ark was meant to be carried. The presence of God was meant to be carried. And if you go back to the scriptures that we just read in verse 3, it says that they put the ark of God on a cart. It was a new cart. It was shiny, but it wasn't being carried. As a matter of fact, it was being pulled, remember, by the oxen that stumbled, that caused Uzzah to put his hand out and to face suffering. Now, if the ark had been carried, this would not have happened. But they weren't obeying. They weren't following the instructions. The presence of God, the Ark of the Covenant was meant to be carried by man, not pulled behind animals. That's just not how it was meant to be. God's presence is meant to be carried by us. And if you think about it being pulled, number 1, you have the presence of God directly behind the butt of animals, right? And that's not giving God reverence. It's just right there, and it's being pulled in it. And the way that this thing was made, it was made to be lifted up on these men's shoulders, raising the presence of God up above them. saying that this is more important. I'm not going to pull it or drag it behind me. I'm not going to set it to the side. I'm not going to let someone else carry my faith. I'm going to carry my faith for myself. We're meant to carry the presence of God. Our faith is meant to be carried and not carted behind us. We're meant to carry our faith. I think sometimes what happens is maybe we get too busy. You say, I was carrying it, but in this season I just don't have time, so I'm going to place it over here, and I'll go to it when I get a chance. Or maybe the burden of carrying our faith is too much, and so we want to stay comfortable in our faith, and so we say, I'll put it over here for safekeeping, and maybe I'll drag it with me, maybe I'll pull it, maybe I'll take what I want when I need it, but I can't carry it all the time. It's too heavy, it's too much. And we take the easy route, and we get comfortable in that. And I think for Uzzah, this is what happened. He got comfortable. And it was easier to put the Ark of the Covenant on a new cart, pulled by 2 oxen, and dance and enjoy himself beside it than it was to carry it himself. Isn't that interesting? How often do we do that as Christians? We still want to enjoy some of the things that we enjoy, so we'll just put God off to the side. Sometimes I feel like we treat our faith like a buffet. I like this, I like this, I don't like that, I don't like that, I don't like that. I'm going to take all these, I'm going to put these on my tray right over here. And I'll take those things with me. Your faith is not a buffet to pick and choose. God's word is not a buffet to pick and choose what you like and what you don't like. We're called to carry our faith. And I wonder, just like in the story, because they weren't carrying their faith, they stumbled, right? They weren't carrying it. They weren't being obedient the way that God told them, and there was this stumbling. I wonder how often, because you got comfortable in your faith, that you stumbled in your faith. And was your comfort worth your suffering? That's the reality. Not all of our sin leads to suffering. Like I said last week, we all suffer because of sin, not necessarily our sin, but at the same time, we still suffer for our sin and for our disobedience in our lives. I was thinking about this carrying act. And here's what's so neat about it. The way that God designed the ark was so that we wouldn't have to carry it alone. I meant to get a picture, but I forgot. And so the way that it looks is there's the ark, and then it has, on both sides, it has these metal holes, and poles go through those holes. And then there are 4 men that carry the ark together. You see, we're meant to carry our faith, but we're not meant to carry our faith alone. And that's what's so important too. Because we can walk in unison, in the same direction, and work with other men and other women to carry our faith. You see, had they been carrying their faith and carrying their faith together, there would have been no stumbling. There would have been no suffering. The joy could have kept going in their lives. Listen, carrying your faith, that's obedience to God. Carting your faith is trying to live as conveniently as possible for God. But he designed us to carry it. He designed us not to carry it alone. I was looking up the ark and how much it weighed. They said it weighed approximately 565 pounds. Does any man in here think they could cart around 565 pounds? I could. I know you guys couldn't, but I could. But no, so it's heavy, right? The Ark of the Covenant's heavy. And it wasn't meant to be carried alone. But you think about that too. You think about how heavy it is. Even if you're distributing 565 pounds between 4 people, it's still a burden, right? But it's a burden that we are meant to carry. It's a burden that we are meant to have in our lives. See, God didn't expect them to carry it by themselves, and he doesn't expect us to carry our faith by ourselves. We are meant to carry our faith with others. We are meant to, suffer together. We are meant to celebrate together. We are meant to do life together, not alone. And if you're trying to carry the weight of your Christian life by your own, on your own and you're not engaging in community, you're not engaging in accountability, you're not engaging with other Christians, you will quickly take what you're carrying and put it on a cart because it's just going to be easier to handle that way. But instead of taking the presence of God and your faith and setting it to the side, man, lift it up higher and rally people around you to carry your faith with you. That's how it was meant to be. That's how we were meant to carry the presence of God. And when you carry the presence of God, the way that you're meant to, it's still gonna be a burden, but that burden can quickly turn into a blessing. And so I wanted to explain that to you and have you understand that Uzzah, yes, he died. And yes, it was horrible. And there was suffering and there was lament and there was mourning, but I need you to know that it wasn't unmerited. It wasn't like God was just like, and you're dead. No. He had a reason and a purpose for it. The other thing that's so interesting about this, and I was reading up on this, the house that Uzzah stayed in, his father's house, the Ark of the Covenant had presided there for a while. And one of the things I read said that, and maybe Uzzah got too comfortable in the presence of God and lost his reverence for God. He forgot to treat God as sovereign. Maybe in this moment, he was trying to show off in front of all these people and say, hey, look at me. I've been around God for so long. I've been around God so long that I can even reach out and touch it. I know it says it won't, but I can do it. See, God knows our heart. God knows our motives. And I can't pretend to know, exactly why this man died, but something tells me that his heart wasn't right. And instead of being obedient in his faith, he was just trying to show it off, to act religious, to say the right thing, to do the right thing. But man, he was not being obedient in his life. So disobedience to God, which is sin, it leads to suffering. And in this case, it cost Uzzah his life. So I wanted you to understand that. But now I want to move forward to verse 8. Here's what it says. Uzzah was just killed. And David became angry. That's what it says. David was angry because the Lord had killed Uzzah. In verse 9, it says, David was afraid of the Lord that day. And he said, how can the ark of the Lord come to me now? Isn't it interesting how quickly your joy can go to fear when you're living in disobedience, when you're facing suffering? They thought that there was going to be blessing. They thought the presence of God was going to bless them, was going to be amazing, but they weren't treating him the right way. And because they experienced suffering, so I don't know if I can deal with this. I can deal with the goodness of God, but I can't deal with the consequences of my sin. So I'll back away. I won't bring it. And so verse 10, it says, so David would not move the ark of the Lord to be with him. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom, a man from Gath. You see, this incident that took place, that happened to Uzzah, it stole David's joy. And in his anger and in his fear, he isolated himself from God. He pushed God away and said, you know what, I don't think I can handle this right now. I don't understand it. And what I need you to know, and I said this like suffering and blessing, they come with the presence of God. Suffering and blessing. You're going to experience both in your life. You can't have one without the other. And this is what's so important, the further away you get from God, the less blessing you will receive from God. David thought, well, I'll just keep him over there and I'll keep doing my thing. That way I won't face suffering. But if that's how you're going to treat it, you're not going to get blessing either. At least not the blessing that God has for you. It can be immense if you're willing to live obediently and live for God. Suffering, blessing, they come with God. Verse 11, it says this, the ark of the Lord stayed in Obed-Edom's house for 3 months. Guess what? The Lord blessed Obed-Edom and all of his family. Now, what do you think David did? Well, David's like, oh, there's blessing to be had? The people told David that the Lord blessed and all of the people belongs to him. So because the ark was there, so David, well, what did he do? He went and grabbed it. He's like, oh man, there's blessing. I think it's so funny that when suffering happens, we kind of withdraw from God. But when we see blessing can be had, we're like, oh, yeah, let me get some of that. I want some of that. I want some of the blessing. Let me get some of the blessing. We don't want to work for the blessing, but we'll take the blessing, but we don't want the suffering that comes along with it. That's what happens. That's not how it's meant to be. But that's what David does. But he does it right this time. So David went and he brought it up from Obed-Edom's house to Jerusalem, and he did it with joy. That's what he did it with. In verse 13, and this is what's so important, it says, when the men, what were they doing? Where was it? When the men, is it up there? 13, go back one. Maybe I didn't put it in there. It's not in there. Here's what it says. When the men carrying the Ark of the Covenant had walked 6 steps, David did some stuff that doesn't really matter. But here's what it says. That the men were carrying. You understand that, right? In the first story, what were they doing? They were carting it. They weren't doing it the right way, but now they're carrying it. David understood what took place. You go over to Chronicles, it talks about this and how David got the priests and the Levites and he said, I don't know what happened. We did something wrong. Let's figure it out. Let's operate in obedience so we can experience blessing and have joy. And that's what they did. And so the men, they are carrying the ark of the Lord the way that it was supposed to be, together in unison, and they're celebrating. The ark is being carried, and see, suffering was had. But once it was met with obedience, it was followed with joy. You see, blessing and joy in your life will follow obedience every time. But are you willing to be obedient? Are you willing to follow the instructions given to us in God's word? All of them. Not just the ones that are comfortable, not just the ones that are convenient, all of them. Here's what it says in verse 14. It says, then David danced with all his might before the Lord. He had a holy linen vest on. Verse 15, David and all the Israelites, they shouted with joy and they blew trumpets as they brought the ark of the Lord to the city. They experienced suffering, right? They weren't discounting the fact that Uzzah had died, but they weren't going to stay there. They're going to say, okay, this happened, suffering happened, but I'm going to continue on. I'm going to find obedience, and in that I'm going to find joy. I'm going to be a carrier of my faith. You see, David's joy, despite his suffering, was still contagious. It couldn't be contained. If you read into this story, it says that David was basically dancing in the streets in his underwear. Undignified. He is the king. Kings don't act that way. David's like, I don't care. I don't care who's watching. I'm going to dance like Jesus is watching. That's what I want to dance like. That's the joy that he had. And see, unconditional joy in Jesus should be contagious. Unconditional. Whether you're suffering, whether you're experiencing blessing, there should always be joy that you have in Jesus and that everyone should see. We are meant to carry the joy and the faith and the salvation that we found in Jesus everywhere to the world. Not just to carry it here on Sundays and leave it here. Not just to carry it in our homes where it's easy. We're meant to take it out into the world so people can see, so people can experience it. And one of the greatest things that you can do as a Jesus follower when you're suffering is you can continue to showcase joy in Jesus. Because when people see the true source of joy, which is Jesus, they can say, I want to know what you have and how I can get it. And that's how you help people embrace Jesus in their life, by continuing to live in joy despite your circumstances. Find that joy, keep that joy, carry that joy wherever you are. Because an attitude of joy can overpower an atmosphere of negativity. You bring that into whatever you're going through. You bring that into other people's lives. You bring that into your family, into your neighborhood, into your workplace. You bring the joy that Jesus has given to you, and you give it out. And you say, man, you got to experience this. You got to understand how much Jesus loves you and what he has for you. You got to understand what Jesus wants to do through you. Suffering happened. A man died. Listen, we aren't meant to dwell in our loss and in our pain and in our suffering. We are meant to carry our faith and step into our purpose and calling to help other people embrace Jesus. And you can't do that if you're stuck on the pain and the suffering that you are facing and you forget of the goodness that God has for you. Earlier this year, we went through kind of this joy-suffering sandwich that I'm talking about. We started Kairos Church back in October, and we moved through, and it was awesome, and our launch was awesome, and we just got to see God do some cool things. And then we were planning for Christmas, and Christmas was just phenomenal. Just the people that were there, the lives that were changed. There's transformation. And so there's just this immense joy, celebrating all that God did. And then we got into January. And there were some things that were going on kind of behind the scenes. And I haven't shared this with a lot of people, but there were some financial struggles that were taking place within the church. And I remember just thinking like they were so big that I remember thinking, man, I'm about to not have a job anymore. I'm about to not be a pastor of a church anymore. And I just remember feeling defeated and not understanding why this was happening. We're seeing God move, we're seeing God work, we're seeing lives transform, but why is this taking place? Why are we going through this? Why are we getting struggles in our finances and different things that are going on? And the moment that takes place, I begin to examine myself. God, what am I doing wrong? Where have I been disobedient? What could I do better? And I think a lot of times we do that, and I think in some cases we do need to examine ourselves, but other times we need to understand that we need to stop putting it on ourselves and understand that it's all in God's control. So I remember just struggling through this, and for weeks, not knowing what was going to happen, not knowing if we could operate the next week at church, not knowing where God was going to lead us. But then I remembered that God called me to this. I remembered that God equipped me for this. I began to think back about how God was moving and these moments that were taking place that you can't ignore. Like that is the hand of God. And despite our struggles, despite our suffering, God was saying to me in this moment, remain obedient in your calling. He says, man, there's going to be a burden and it will be heavy. But if you stay obedient, if you stay joyful, I will show you things you could never even imagine. And I just remember saying, you know what, God? I believe that. I'm going to believe your truth. I'm going to believe your word. I'm going to believe that you called me, that you equipped me, that you are moving and you're going to continue to move. That no matter what happens along the way, that I will follow you obediently and I will follow you joyfully into whatever you call me to. And I kid you not, since the beginning of the year, this is what God's been doing. Over 75 people have embraced Jesus in their life. And you talk about joy, there's joy. 13 people have been baptized at our church, y'all. In the last 3 months, 13 people have been baptized, have taken that step to declare their faith. There's joy in that. We've had 33 people sign up to become moment makers, to serve, to be the hands and feet of Jesus, and there's joy in that. And here's what's so important is there's so much joy, but in my suffering, I could have withdrawn from it, and many people would not have been able to embrace Jesus because I was dwelling on the bad and not remembering the good. We can't do that in our lives. We have got to embrace what God is doing and step into our calling joyfully and obediently and say, no matter what happens, I'm going to hold on to joy and I'm going to hold on to Jesus. And so if you're here today, I'm going to ask that the band would come up and someone will play something pretty behind me so I sound good. Do that. Listen, if you've lost your joy, what do you got to do to find it again? If you're carrying your faith and your burden on your own, who can you get to rally around you to help you carry your faith, to help you get back to not just carting it, but carrying it and being strong in your faith? Maybe you've messed up. Maybe you've been disobedient. Fine, own up to it. Ask God for forgiveness and move on. You don't need to dwell there. You don't need to stay there. Your sins are forgiven by Jesus if you just give them to him and let him go. Because Jesus died for your sins. They're paid for. Stop living in the past and step into God's purpose for your life. The joy that he has for your life. If you're carting your faith, knock it off. Pick it up. Stop being lazy. Stop being comfortable. Your life in Jesus Christ is not meant to be convenient or comfortable. And if you want proof of that, see Jesus in the life that he lived. The man that you pledged to be a follower of. Nothing he did was comfortable. Nothing he did was convenient. He took your place on the cross. So what do you got to do to pick up your faith and carry it and own it and live it and be it and breathe it. What do you got to do to experience joy? Because I believe the world needs to see more Jesus followers who are living out joy and not even worrying about their suffering. That's how you change the world. That's how you radically transform the world for Jesus Christ. You show people the life and the love and the joy and the hope and the peace that you have found in Jesus. Don't hold it back. There is nothing greater than salvation through Jesus Christ. Carry it, own it, share it. Share it with the world. Take it back. We're not meant to live in suffering. We're meant to live out our joy, and that's what I want to do here. I want us to find joy. I want us to share joy. Church, would you stand with me? Bow your heads. I want to pray. But as I pray, as you begin to pray, here's my challenge to you. Challenge number 1, be a carrier of your faith. Pick it up. Own it. Serve, give, worship, get involved, do something. Take it from this place, take it into your workplace, take it into your home. Carry it around with you wherever you go so people can know that you belong to Jesus. Carry your faith. And as you do that, live out of joy. Joy. Unending, unconditional, unmerited joy that can only be found in Jesus. And as you do that, may your life's calling be to help other people embrace Jesus, to find the joy, to find the hope, to find the new life that you have found in Him. God, today we come to you and we are celebrating the fact that through our church, through us, what we're doing, how we're living, God, that today, no matter if we've been guarding our faith, no matter if we've been living in disobedience, no matter if we've been dwelling in suffering, that we're going to leave it here. We don't need it anymore. We're going to pick up our faith. We're going to live out our joy, and we're going to take it to the world to transform this community for your Son, Jesus Christ. We are meant to live joyful. We are meant to celebrate, not just when we become Christians, but throughout our entire life as we follow Him. I don't want to discount what you're going through. I don't want to discount what you're experiencing, but I can tell you, if you give it to Him, if you share it with others, man, you can get through it. You can get past it. You can find joy and get to the other side of it. Continue to pursue Jesus and to carry your faith no matter what takes place in your life. If you're here today, and you desire that more than anything in your life, to find that joy, to let go of suffering, to let go of pain, I just need you to know that it's found in Jesus and only in Jesus. And if you have never given your life to Him, you've never asked Him into your heart, you've never asked Him for forgiveness, but today you're ready to do that, to say, today, God, I believe that your Son Jesus died on the cross for my sins so that I can experience new life and new joy in Him. If you want to do that today, to ask Jesus into your life, would you raise your hand so that I can pray with you? Raise it up high and pray this with me. Say, today, God, I want to experience your joy through Jesus. I believe He is your Son. I believe He died on the cross for my sins, and I believe more than anything that He rose again so that I can be forgiven, so that I can experience new life, and that I can have a relationship with you. I believe that today. I declare that today, and I will live this day and forward with joy found in Jesus. Come into my heart. God, today I pray that in this moment, we can look back and remember what God saved us from, what God pulled us out of, and what God is leading us into, and we can celebrate and have joy, unconditional, undignified joy in your Son, Jesus Christ. It's in His name that we pray. Amen. Amen. Now let's celebrate.